We will send you the presentation after this event in a follow-up email so that you can always also have a look again. We will also upload it on a YouTube channel so that you can listen to it again. You can ask your questions during the webinars, during both presentations of Gary and me in the chat question, and we'll also reserve specifically about 10 minutes after the presentations to answer your questions. This is the setup of this webinar. You will always have the big window on the left-hand side with the actual presentation. There is on the right upper hand side a speaker's photo so that you have an approximate idea of what we look like. And there's the small chat window. Let's now have a look at what the International Incoming Fellowship is. It's a so-called Marie Curie Action. These are fellowships by the European Commission, specifically designed to attract top-class researchers from so-called third countries to Europe. Third countries doesn't mean it's not EU member states or the associated countries in the Framework 7 program, such as Norway or Israel, but all other countries in the world. Marie Curie fellowships have a duration for up to 2 years, and they work this way. If you come to Europe, you will choose a host institution, you will get an employment contract with the European host institution. The goal of this fellowship is to develop research cooperation between Europe and all other parts of the world. For whom, these are the research topics that can be funded. You might ask yourself what is possible. We already heard and listened to and saw your chat before, so we know there are researchers from all possible disciplines. The good news is everyone can apply, every research topic can be funded. If it's interdisciplinary, if it's very new, it does not matter having a disciplinary name. This does not matter, anything can be funded. And when applying, you will assign your proposal to a certain thematic sector so that the right evaluators can be found. For whom are these fellowships? Let's briefly talk about the eligibility criteria. The idea is, as I said before, it's about researchers who are moving from non-European countries to EU member states or associated countries. There is no minimum time that you must have spent in the non-EU country before, but always think of the goal. It's transfer of knowledge from outside of Europe to Europe. So if you gained expertise, valuable scientific expertise in a country outside of Europe, then you can apply for the IIF. If you have already been in Europe or are at the moment there, you could also apply for a so-called intra-European fellowship. We will not talk about this today, but I'll focus on it later. I'll show you a website where there will be more information on the intra-European fellowship. I'll focus today on the IIF. To apply, however, you must either have a doctoral degree or at least 4 years of full-time research experience counted from the day on that you obtained the degree which permitted you officially to embark on a doctorate. In most countries, this is the Master of Science. In some countries, it can also be the Bachelor. This depends, check within the regulations of your country or the country of your future host organization. But this is the minimum. The more experience you have, the better it is, because this is a very competitive fellowship scheme. It's also possible to have a return phase to your country of origin. I will not go into the details for that now, but please have a look in the official documents. There is more information now. Please listen. In order to be eligible, and you have the doctoral degree or the 4 years of full-time research experience, you cannot have been more than 12 months immediately prior, in the 3 years immediately prior to the deadline of this call, in the country of your future host. So that means if you have been, let's say you would like to go to Norway now for the fellowship, but you have been there already for 18 months in the past 3 years, then you would not be eligible. This is the mobility rule. It has to be less than 12 months in the last 3 years prior to the deadline. If you have been in the country of your future host organization for a couple of weeks for a vacation, this does not matter. Short stays are not taken into account. I have talked about a host institution. How can you find one? Well, it's very important that you do not carry out your research just on your own. You have to make the application for the International Incoming Fellowship in liaison with the organization or institution that will be willing to host you in Europe. Host organizations can be universities, research centers, or even companies. It's important that they carry out research and that they are suitable to host you and that there is a supervisor willing to work with you. The reputation of a host institution is a nice plus if it's a well-known university, for example, but it's not the most important thing. The most important thing when you choose a host institution is that it matches with your research project. Our advice is to search for the host institution very early on. Contact a potential supervisor with an abstract of your project now. And when you decide for a host institution, please bear in mind you'll work closely together with the supervisor for the following 2 years, so make sure you get along with each other. Let's have a look at the timeline. The calls for proposals is open now, since March 14th, and the deadline for this call will be on August 14th at 5 p.m. Brussels time. That means after that you cannot submit any additional information anymore. If your proposal is not then submitted, there's nothing nobody can do. Between September and October 2013, the evaluation will take place, and approximately at the end of November and December 2013, you will get the first information to applicants. In January and February 2014, I apologize for the typo there, so next year, you will enter the negotiation phase in case your proposal was successful. It's a very nice word, negotiation phase. Do not let that fool you. It's not really a negotiation. It's merely an administrative process that goes on there. And if everything goes well, you first can start your proposal in March 2014. But if you still have other obligations or another employment contract, your last possible start date is March 2015. Let's talk about the money that you can get with such a fellowship. After all, this is why you might listen now. It works this way. You come to Europe with a fellowship to your host organization. The European Commission signs a contract with the host organization, and they will sign a contract for you. The European Commission gives the salary that you're entitled to touch to the host institution, and they will pay it to you. There's no need to worry. The European Commission has a very strict look on the fact that the fellow really gets the money that he or she is entitled to. Again, we will count, it depends on how much research experience you have. We will count again from the day on that you obtain the degree you that officially allowed you to embark on a doctorate. If this is less than 10 years ago, you will get a so-called living allowance of 58,500 euros per year. If you have more than 10 years experience, it's 87,500 euros per year. And this will be combined with a mobility allowance, depending on if you have family or not family obligations, either 700 euros per month or 1,000 euros per month. This financial support is provided for 12 to 24 months because it is possible to apply also for less than 2 years for the fellowship. However, we always advise you to use the full duration. It is always possible to shorten the fellowship in case you work faster. It's never possible to make it longer. You will not get more money. So we advise for the full 2 years. These rates that I just talked about are specified by the European Commission. They are multiplied with the country correction coefficient of the country that you will go to. This is to take into account the different living standards in the different countries. Be aware that most countries tax the income. The host institution, additionally, receives 700 euros per researcher month as a contribution to the overheads, so that they can pay your desk and your copying machine, and 800 euros per researcher month as a contribution to the research expenses. Now, you've heard how it works basically and that there is a lot of money in it. You might ask yourself now, is it really worth it applying for? To give you an idea of how competitive the fellowship scheme is, we listed here on this slide the success rates of the last years. You can see that it started well in 2007 with nearly 24% of success rate. This success rate decreased over the years and it has been lately around 14%. So in absolute numbers, for 2012 it meant that more than 1,400 people submitted an IIF proposal, out of which 190 got financed. The message here, it is competitive, you have to prepare very well, but the fact that you now are registered to this webinar and that you're listening to us is already the best first step that you can take. So also our message is, in case you do not get the fellowship this year because it is competitive, you can always submit a proposal the next year again. In the next year, things will change a little bit as the European Framework Program for Research does change, but it is almost guaranteed already now that there will be a fellowship scheme which is very, very similar. This is now what you can get and your chances. Let's now have a look at the basic documents that you will need in case you go for such a fellowship. There are two documents. The first one is the so-called work program People 2013. It is the background information on these overall types of fellowship schemes, and it gives you again the overall goal of the international incoming fellowship. Even more important is the guide for applicants. This is the document that we cannot spare you to read. In case you want to apply, you really have to read this document very carefully, and it will give you all the details for your application. There are very detailed outlines on how you shall write the proposal, including information on the evaluation process, on the salary, everything is in there. You can find both of these documents on the Research Participant Portal. It's the website by the European Commission for researchers. And there we have a screenshot. In case you're confused, you always have to look for the purple button People, and if you click on this on the left-hand side, then you will get information on the fellowship schemes. Let's now have a look at the different parts of a proposal. There are two parts, Part A and Part B. Part A deals basically with all the administrative issues. Information on the host institution, contact data of the fellow, scientific panel, etc., etc. Part B deals with the actual proposal part, where you write your scientific research. I wrote on this slide that you should register ideally now on the Research Participant Portal for this call and start filling in the administrative forms. However, we checked the electronic proposal submission service is not yet open at the moment, so you cannot really register, but you can already download all the information you need, and you will be able to register in a couple of days. Do this early on. Do not start registering at the day of the deadline. This will be much too late. There's a lot of information you will need from your host institution, so make sure you register in time. I will talk now specifically about the Part B of the proposal. If you read the guide for applicants, you will see that this Part B is structured very clearly, and you need to address all of the issues mentioned in the guide for applicants. Some of the 5 evaluation criteria have a threshold. We will talk about that later. Each area is weighted, and here comes the surprising thing. The science part only counts for 25%. You might argue now that you're a researcher and this is a research proposal. What is going on with the other 75%? We will have a look at that. It's very important now that you do not forget the rest. While preparing the proposal, do not only spend time now on the research part, but also spend time now on the other parts. We'll have a look at the evaluation criteria. There are 5 evaluation criteria. The first one, the dark blue one, is the science and technology part. This is where you actually describe your project on 8 pages. The transfer of knowledge part, we explained that the international incoming fellowship is important because the European research area wants to benefit from your knowledge, and you have to describe how this knowledge will be transferred to Europe. The green part is about you as a researcher. There you have to describe your achievements, and you have to list your publications. You can explain why you are the best researcher for carrying out this type of project. Then you have only 6 pages to describe the implementation. That means the project management. This is really how will you deal with the work, when will you start, what will you need, what step do you have to undertake. And the light blue part, 4 pages, I'm sorry, I forgot on the right-hand side to mention this is the impact part. This is important because evaluators want to see what will change in the scientific world, in the European research area for the involved parties after you finished your project. It's kind of the motivation. It's to show evaluators why they should give a green light, and why they should say, please, European Commission, fund this research proposal. So, out of experience, we know this is very often not easy to write. We realize that, so it's important you already familiarize yourself with this now and start writing work on this now. I will talk now in the future about the different evaluation criteria. Let's start with the first one, the S&T quality. As I said, it's 8 pages and it counts for 25%. You are, of course, experts in your research area, so this might be the easiest part for you to write. You have to describe the research and technological quality, including any interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary aspects of your proposal. You have to give as many details as possible on the appropriateness of the research methodology. You should show why this project is original and innovative and related to the state of the art of the research in your field. You also have to show the timeliness and relevance of the project, and already give information on the host research expertise in the field and on the quality of the group and scientist in charge. I believe it might be rather easy for you to write this. However, in order to make it clearer for you, we formulated a couple of questions. After you have written this part of the proposal, you can ask these questions to the text. Do not forget to cite correctly all the scientific sources that you need, and you have to document these properly. After all, this is a scientific text. For your information, you should stay within the page limit of the proposal. You cannot upload any annexes, for example, with the references. References have to be part of the page limit. When you document your citations, make sure you take this into account. Ask yourself if the goal of your project is clearly stated in the very first paragraph. You have to captivate evaluators. These people have to read a lot. They take their work very seriously. They are also researchers in the field. However, they are under a lot of time pressure. And you know it, I suppose, very well yourself. To have the information, what is this about, can motivate you to read the rest also and to be really interested in your text. The next question you can ask your text. And moreover, while preparing the proposal, ask your host, why is this really the best host for your project? You should write this project in liaison with the host institution, with your supervisor, and here's already a place for the information. Convince evaluators to show, yes, I really chose the best host for my project. Also, go into more detail and elaborate this question regarding the research group and the supervisor that you will work with. Go over this chapter and really point out any multi or interdisciplinary aspects. You can make this an extra subchapter. If you want, work with graphics and figures and tables. This really makes it easier to read a text. You have a page limit. Respect the page limit, but you can put a lot of information in graphics, figures, and tables. Explicitly explain the state of the art and the progress beyond the state of the art. Where will you be after the research project? And last but not least, really make it very, very clear in simple phrases. Why is this project now important? Why should the European Commission fund your research project? This has to be very, very clear. This is for the very first evaluation criteria. Let's now have a look at the next one, the so-called transfer of knowledge. It's only 2 pages. It counts for 15%. As I explained, the European research area would like to benefit from the expertise that you bring to Europe. So you have to describe the clarity and the quality of the transfer of knowledge objectives. And also you have to point out very clearly the potential of transferring knowledge to the European host institution and, moreover, bringing knowledge to Europe. While you write these 2 pages, ask yourself the following questions. Do you mention which knowledge it is that you will bring to the host institution? It shall be very, very clear. Discuss this with your host before you will start writing and make a match. What is it that you will bring them? Where is a lack of expertise on their side? Where can you combine things? Do you mention in this chapter how you will transfer your knowledge? In which form? Will you give lectures? Will you have group discussions with your peers? You will work together on a research project. How will your colleagues benefit from your expertise? And do you clearly mention why it is so important to transfer this type of expertise to the European research area? What is it that will change here after Europe and the European host institution gains access to your expertise? The next criterion deals with the researcher. On 7 pages, you can explain who you are as a researcher. This counts for 25%. It's really important again. You should describe your research experience so far. You have to list your research results, any patents, publications, teaching experience, everything that you did so far. You have to find a way to explain that you are able of independent thinking, that you have leadership qualities and the capacity to transfer knowledge. And you have to show very clearly the match between the fellow's profile, that is you, and your project. While writing, ask yourself these questions. Do you get a really good impression of the researcher's achievements at first sight? Are all your achievements clearly stated and well structured? Evaluators do not want to get lost in the text. You can help them by well structuring all the information you want to give. Do you give examples for your independent thinking, for your leadership quality? This has to be really very clear for evaluators. They can trust you with this project. And do you clearly show why you and your project match? Really, at the end of this chapter, if an evaluator reads this, he or she has to know, okay, this is the right person for this type of project. Let's now have a look at the implementation part of the proposal. It's on 6 pages. It weighs 15%. What you have to describe here are the quality of infrastructure and the facilities where you will be and the international collaborations of the host institution. You have to show the practical arrangements for the implementation and management of your research project. This means when you arrive there, can you really start working from day 1 on? Or do you still need to gain access to a library or so? You have to avoid any lost time. So make sure here, already while discussing with the host, that everything is ready when you arrive. You have to show the overall feasibility and credibility of the project, including a work plan. This is really also to force you while working on your research proposal that you think your project through. And you have to describe any practical and administrative arrangements and also support for the hosting of the fellow. While you write this part, you can work with these questions. Do you have a nicely layouted work plan or a Gantt chart? We will give you an example on the next slide. This is important. You can start with this and then you can draft your work plan, and from that on, everything else hopefully will fall into place. Do you state the international projects that your host institution is involved, in particular for your specific research area? State these projects, state why the collaborations can be useful for you and how can you benefit from these. Do you assess potential risks in your proposal? We all know research, it's always risky. There's always something that can go wrong, so you have to provide a plan B. And also, buffer time, add it. If something goes wrong, it's very important for evaluators to see that you can take into account these risks and work with them. Do you make a reference to a website called euraccess.eu? Euraccess are service centers financed by the European Commission. They are for researchers who are on the move, who are moving from one country to another. And you will find a lot of information, practical, helpful information for you when you chose a host institution and you want to make sure, do I maybe need a work visa? Does my spouse need a work permit? Where can we give the children to school? You will find information in the help desk listed on this website. While writing the proposal, already make clear that you informed yourself via this website. While drafting your proposal, do not forget to set milestones. What is the first important step that you have to reach in order to get to the next step? It will help you structure your proposal. What will you need when you start working? As I said before, will you need access to a specific lab? Are there machines that you will use? Are these machines very new and you're not yet familiar with them? Then you will need to plan some time in order to get used to them. Again, the Euraccess website is a very valuable source of information. There is a document called Charter and Code. It's a document of the European Commission. It is dealing with giving researchers the best employment conditions and making research a real career. Almost all European host institutions have signed this Charter and Code document. This is in order to ensure that when you get there, you will have decent employment conditions. But make a reference, show the evaluators you chose your host carefully and they are in line with Charter and Code. Now for the promised example of a work plan. This is just one way to do it. On the left-hand side you have the tasks and activities, and on the right-hand side the duration in months. You can make it more fancy, you can even go into more detail, but this is the sort of the minimum what we advise you to do there. Now, for the last evaluation criteria, it's called impact. It's 4 pages, it weighs 20%, so it's very important also. You have to describe here the potential for creating long-term collaborations and mutually beneficial cooperation between Europe and the country where you have been before. You have to show the contribution to European excellence and European competitiveness through the transfer of knowledge, and you should outline very detailed the impact of the proposed outreach activities. While writing this, we advise you to think of the following. Ask yourself, what will you have achieved after the project? And what is the impact on the European research area? Really go and ask your future host institution, okay, how will we continue to collaborate after the project is finished? Come up with some nice ideas. Give details on the planned outreach activities. Outreach activities are very important. They are not the dissemination, the sharing of your results and knowledge with your peers, but it's sharing your research with the general public. This can take, for example, this can be you visit a school one day and you work with the children on a research project. Or you can have a blog where you regularly report in commonly understandable language on your research. But make sure that you're not too general. Show that your outreach activities are original and that they correspond to your project. I would also like to add here, think of publishing your research results maybe via open access facilities. Here are the couple of websites I already mentioned, the Euraccess service centers. I can really only recommend you to have a look at this website. On it you will find the code of conduct and charter. You will also find for your help the career development plan. This can be helpful. Have a look at it. You can draft this document with your future supervisor at the beginning of the project. It's to help you structure your career. In case you want to do this, mention it in this part here and show you will think ahead with your project. Now, a couple of words on the so-called referees assessments. These are essentially letters of recommendation you can add to the proposal. You have to ask someone who knows your way to work. It can be, for example, your PhD supervisor, but it cannot be your future supervisor. Ask these people that you have in mind timely for their opinion. They will be contacted by the European Commission via email, because you give their email contact data once you register for the proposal submission. Make sure they check their emails and also their spam filter. Do this in time. You cannot do it after the deadline. Make your mind up now, ask these people, and then give the contact data in the electronic proposal submission system. If you have these assessments, it's a very nice plus. If you do not have it, something goes wrong, or you didn't think of it, or there's nobody who really wants to say something, do not worry, it's not a must. Focus on the proposal. This is the most important thing. But if you have the assessments, of course, it's a nice plus. Now for some tips and tricks. Please follow the exact structure of the guide for applicants. You always can add additional information in subchapters, but to never leave a chapter out. Spoon feed the evaluators with the information. It is your task to make your text comprehensible. It is not their task to search for information. Stay within the page limits. If you write more than the given page limits, evaluators are briefed that they will disregard any information that is on there. So do yourself the favor, stay within the page limits. And give, however, as many details as possible, because evaluators can only judge upon the information you give them in the proposal. They will not have the time to check out websites or have a look at your publications or search additional information. Some more tips and tricks. Do not forget a single achievement, even if they seem natural to you, but write them down. Document everything in details. It's not enough to say, I have participated in 10 international projects, but show your role there. The proposal has to be understandable for experts. The evaluators are researchers in the field, but be aware that they might not be exactly in your research field, so take this into account. Also, they are from all over the world, so have that in mind, for example, when you use non-English terms. Make little appetizers, subtitles, paragraphs, graphs. Make the proposal nice to read. Write short sentences and keywords, use paragraphs, highlight the important parts, make it a really nice document. And tables and graphics also can help. Make sure they are readable in black and white. This is because evaluators might print out the document only in black and white. Here is an example for a table, how you could work. We put some potential objectives that you could maybe have in your research project, for example, support implementation policies or so. We also put a non-example, save the world from climate change, is very idealistic, it's a noble goal. However, this is not the way you should phrase things. You have to be as specific as possible. There are also 2 examples for graphics. You will know for your research area which type of graphic is most suitable. This is the information on the International Incoming Fellowship, but maybe you say now, okay, this is not really for me, or I'm not ready this year, or I already have an employment contract with a host institution in Europe. There is something else. It's a so-called Career Integration Grant, the CIG. It was designed by the European Commission to help researchers establish their career in Europe. It's not a salary that you get there, but it's a flat rate of 25,000 euro per year from 2 to 4 years. It's aimed again at experienced researchers, so people who have a PhD or 4 years of full-time research experience. And again, the mobility rules applies. What is mandatory here, you have to have a 100% working contract for at least the time of the duration of the career integration grant. This is important. And the next call deadline is September 18th, so you can still submit a proposal for this. In case you want to go for the CIG, check out the research participant portal. There's information, the same as for the IIF, but it's a different guide for applicants. The proposal is similar, but not exactly the same. If you are not sure that the IIF is really the right thing for you, or the CIG neither, there are many other possibilities to get a research position in Europe. Check out the website euraccess.eu, because there's a very well-functioning job motor. You can search for jobs depending on the country where you want to go to, or your research profile, your research field. There are many, many, many job possibilities for you. More useful information on these websites. You will have a lot of information there. In case you do get lost on some of these pages, do not worry. We realize it is a lot, but the most important thing is really the work program and the guide for applicants. Now, this is more or less the end of my presentation. I would like to add, this presentation was held within the frame of the EU project People Network Plus. It's a project that lasts for 2 years. It's a network of the People national contact points. We have 15 partners all over Europe and more than 70 associated partners all over the world. So you can be sure there's almost in every country there is a national contact point, an expert on these Marie Curie actions. We are coordinated by APRE in Italy, and the reason why we hold this webinar and why we want to help you to come to Europe is our goal of the project is to integrate non-EU countries and non-EU researchers in the European research area. On this last slide, I put the link where you can find us, the national contact points in your country. In case there should not be a specialist in your country, you can always ask for advice, the national contact point of your future European host institution. We have an interest of getting you here, so of course we're really willing to help you. Now, I will hand over the microphone to Gary Studd. He obtained an international incoming fellowship and he will tell you his experience.
Okay, good morning or good afternoon. I am delighted to give you a bit of experience with the Marie Curie incoming fellowships that have been a bit of experience on how I got here, what I would, some recommendations on how to work on that proposal, and then a bit on what my experience has been as the outcome. I am currently a senior Marie Curie Research Fellow at Limerick Institute of Technology in Limerick, Ireland, and I have come from the United States and transferred from a Kennedy Space Center in Florida. So what I would like to do is give you a bit of an overview of my education and career. I think it's important to highlight how mobility has played a role in the development of that career. And then my experience with developing this Marie Curie Action Fellowship. First, understanding the requirements that you just had an excellent overview of, how to put together that proposal, and some of the opportunities that have been provided to me by the IIF Fellowship. And finally, some things to consider if you are successful in your application. First, that mobility was extremely important in my early career development. For those of you that are not familiar with the geography of the United States. I was born in the central part of the United States in the plains in Oklahoma, and then moved to the mountains of Arkansas with my family. I still consider that home, and went to 2 years of university at the University of Arkansas in food science. I saw a need to expand my knowledge, so I went back to Oklahoma State, and studied a more general area of biology. At the completion of that, was able to receive funding for a degree in horticulture, which is my specialty. Horticulture, the growth and commercial production of plants, typically ornamental and food plants, apples, peaches, vegetables, flowers. At the completion of that degree at Georgia, once again received funding in a specialized degree in plant physiology at the University of California at Davis. So as you can see that I spent about 2 years at each location learning and gaining information, and I would like to think to a bit transferring information from one institution to another. And then I began my professional career as an assistant professor at the University of Maryland in horticulture. Then my mid-career has been somewhat stable. I was an assistant professor of horticulture at the University of Maryland, doing research in fruit production, greenhouse production, controlled environments. It was a major institution, greater than 35,000 students. And after about 7 years, transferred and started a position as a senior scientist for a number of private companies that are supporting NASA programs in biological sciences at Kennedy Space Center. And that is where I have spent the bulk of my professional career. So what I would like to give you a bit of background is one of the Marie Curie International Incoming Fellowships, how I became interested, and more importantly, why. That's important, that why in preparing the application. Why I would leave Florida to go to Ireland and do that transfer of knowledge. Well, first is what I would bring to the table is where my expertise and interest is in controlled environments, hydroponics, which is the production of plants without soil, and space. And my space is International Space Station and microgravity research. And I have worked many years in the Space Life Science Laboratory in controlled environments in different chambers, expertise on light-emitting diodes, developing the technology and understanding of how plants respond to their environment, where was a interaction with engineers and very specialized and unique applications of biology. And as a process of that and along the course of that research, I became involved and made contact with what ultimately became my host institution at the Limerick Institute of Technology through student exchanges. And a relationship over the course of about 4 years had developed where students, what we would call undergraduates, or to a lesser degree postgraduates, would come visit the laboratory, give some experience on this new science, and then go back to Ireland. So I had begun to develop a relationship, understand what the goals of the Institute of Technology were, and they, in kind, began to understand what my work was and how we could develop a mutually beneficial project. So this proposal, when we began to consider that I would take this expertise that we had developed in the Space Life Science Laboratory, I could take that to a newly established laboratory that had been established in Limerick, the Controlled Environment Laboratory for Life Sciences. And in return, that would allow the expertise to be transferred to students at Limerick Institute of Technology that could come back not only to NASA, but to the other industries. So we would get an exchange of ideas between the two institutions. So a key component in developing the science was how the science that I was interested in doing in controlled environments would support the long-term goals of this newly developed laboratory for life science, and how my expertise could advance the careers of not only my career, but those that I became involved with. So the benefits, as was pointed out, and was a very difficult part of putting together that proposal, was my background as I am a scientist and a researcher. So it was relatively easy, if you will, to identify a research question. It was relatively easy to find the citations, the state of the art, what types of experiments I might want to do, and what impact they could have to the body of science. As was pointed out, that's only 25% of the proposal. What is of a much greater importance are the other things, which was how that would allow me as a researcher to develop my expertise, and how that expertise would help the institution develop, and what impact that could have on the long-term performance. So what we had to emphasize in the proposal was, one, how I was going to benefit as a researcher coming into Europe, that I would be able to develop contacts for expanding knowledge. It would provide me certainly new challenges and opportunities, and identify new areas for the specialized research in controlled environments and space biology to be applied to new areas. The institution, or the host institution, in my case Limerick Institute of Technology, benefited from the establishment of this new program, Controlled Environment Laboratory for Life Sciences. They have new approaches and ideas for implementing science, and new outlets for their students. So these were emphasized within the proposal. And as was highlighted in the previous presentation, the Marie Curie Fellowships have a number of goals. One of which, and certainly important, is to bring in top researchers from around the world into Europe to perform top-level, first-class, high-quality research in their field of their choosing. And that criteria is assessed by 25% of your curricula vitae, or your resume. What have you done? What is your promise? Where have you published? Where have you shown leadership? Where would the investment in Europe, in you, or in my case in me, provide a benefit to Europe and to that institution? So that is critically important, that top quality research questions be performed and that the researcher is capable of completing it. But it is also particularly important to match your expertise to that institution of choice. that is for 2 years of working closely with an institution, highlight your unique skill sets, your background and knowledge, and how that strengthens or advances or develops new or existing programs at your host institution. So what I can't emphasize enough is that as an applicant, you need to know what the needs of that host institution are, what your mentors wants, what their requirements are necessary to advance their programs. You help fill that niche. And it's about synergies. It's more than science, although science is absolutely critical, and without science, your proposal will not progress. But it is also about advancing the education, training, and knowledge that cannot be obtained in other ways. How your presence at this institution will increase their abilities to do their mission. So you need the support of your host institution and a laboratory, and it's critical that how that relationship is implemented and developed is critical. It's 15% of a proposal. As was pointed out, these are competitive proposals, and that area is often the part that will make or break whether you're successful or non-successful. So if I have any overarching advice, it is to make contact with your host institution early in the process and match your expertise as an individual to the needs of the institution. So use your networks. As you have progressed through, you have professors, professional organizations. They are your very best source of people that are involved in work that you're interested in. They can be your advocate. They can tell the host institution what a strong person you are, how you are absolutely the critical person to move their program forward. And define what the project is and what your needs are. And this is a little counterintuitive, but the narrower the scope and the more specific you can be, the better the chance you have of finding the right person, the right institution to match your needs. It is quite easy for the Max Planck Institute, for example, to find somebody that says, I want to work in Germany at Max Planck. It is not so easy to find someone who is interested in transforming X gene on X plant for Y benefit, or someone who is interested and has expertise in advanced design of circuit boards. The more specific you can be, the better your chance of identifying a good match between you and a mentor. And finally, it is very early on to talk to the host institution and get their support, because it is critical that they can provide that background, the parts of institutional support, the information in putting in the proposal come from that institution. Now, in my particular case, I have about 18 months into my 2-year Marie Curie. I have found it to be extremely enlightening. It has been very valuable living in a different research culture, coming into Europe and understanding the complexities and the opportunities of working within the Framework 7 and the European research area, as well as the specific needs of the country, Ireland, that I am working with. And one of the outgrowths and the requirements was for that impact and outreach was how we would expand this laboratory, increase the knowledge base for it, and give new opportunities to the institution. I am happy to say I think we were able to impart part of that impact. An opportunity came to apply for an experiment to be done on the International Space Station that was open as an international competition. Utilizing my position as a Marie Curie Fellow, as an employee on the staff of the Limerick Institute of Technology, I could apply for that through the Institute. I teamed with previous researchers and networks that had been established, and we were successful in that proposal. So that provided the Institute now has become, through the investment of the Marie Curie Incoming Fellowship, bringing new technology. This institute is now the first institution in Ireland to select to lead an experiment to the International Space Station. Their programs have become much more visible, has been on the national news and all the major newspapers, and it's actually quite a coup for the institution. And for me, it's quite a coup because it gives me an opportunity to conduct experiments in microgravity through opportunities I would not have had if I had not been able to participate in the incoming research fellowship. So for me, it's been a very, very positive experiment and experience. There have been some things I would like to suggest to you, that very early on, for the country that you're working with, not only the host institution, but get in contact with the point of contact for the POC for that country. They are extremely helpful. I cannot overemphasize the help that has been provided in identifying issues with immigration, whether the levels of taxation, what's taxable, what is not, other details of mobility, forms that have to be filed, the rules and regulations that you, as an incoming to a known country, will be different. You cannot assume things will be the same. They will be different, and the points of contact are very, very helpful at easing that process. Second, take the time, and you have the time now, to begin to understand the needs of the institution and adapt your skill set in the proposal to closely match your expertise to those needs. This program is designed to help both of you, both of us, the institution, and the incoming researcher. And once, if you are successful, use this opportunity to truly grow your network in this new location. It's an opportunity for me to learn new areas, meet new people, and expand my network within Europe, and that will allow me to start networking for the best source for my next position. So with that, I have provided you some contact information, that you can contact me if you wish. But in summary, read the instructions extremely carefully. Concentrate on those areas beyond the science, your ability to transfer knowledge, implement that science, and the impact that will have to an institution. The more specific you can be, the better. Third, try and get an outside reader to review it. I often get very close to my own proposals, and I don't see things that are obvious to me may not be to the reviewer. And finally, I encourage you to embrace mobility. It expands your knowledge, your understanding of science, and you learn that while things may be different, they're not necessarily wrong, and there is certainly a lot to be learned from each other. And thank you for hanging in here and giving me the opportunity to tell you my experience with the Marie Curie.
Thank you very much, Gary. This is always very nice for us to hear how a successful Marie Curie Fellow experiences his work then. Now, we already received the first questions. We have now 10 minutes time for your questions. The first one was regarding the career integration grant, where I said that you will need, it is absolutely mandatory to have a 100% working contract. Does it mean that no other jobs are possible? Indeed, you cannot have an additional contract. The European Commission intends to make it able to enable you to focus on your research career. The exact wording of the guide for applicants regarding this is the integration host, so your host institution for the career integration grant, must provide the researcher with an adequate full-time work contract for the period of at least the duration of the integration grant, so for at least 2 years. This agreement, so this contract, must be in place at the latest at the project start date. We receive the second question. Please give me a minute to read and understand it and to prepare my answer. And please, you can also ask questions to Gary in case you have a particular question. And as always, if you have a question afterwards that comes to your mind afterwards, Gary and I, we underlined both, you can always contact the national contact points in your country. We are aware of the fact that this was a lot of information. Something more on the career integration grant, because this is a standard question also. You cannot have the career integration grant and the International Incoming Fellowship at the same time. You can apply for both, but in case you get both, you have to decide for one. This is to avoid double funding. The return phase, yes, there is a possible return phase of a maximum of 1 year. And your question is, how does it affect the evaluation? You will have to take this into account when writing your proposal. You will have also to structure your project a little bit different, because you have to give information on this last year of the fellowship, also on the return host institution. In case you go for this, please read the specific details and outlines in the guide for applicants. I will continue with the next question. The question is if the background and the nature of innovativeness of the research, if it has to be as important in the Marie Curie actions as in the ERC. The ERC is the grant of the European Research Council. It's a very, very competitive and very, very high grant with a very high reputation. It's essentially a big sum of money, several million euros for one principal investigator and his research team for a groundbreaking idea. The ERC really puts the emphasis on excellence. The goal of the International Incoming Fellowship is first the mobility of researchers and then of the transfer of knowledge. Gary and I both explained this. So overall, it depends on the overall nature of your research project. Of course, it is nice if you have a groundbreaking idea, but this is not the only evaluation criterion. The EIC, on the other hand, focuses really on, ideally on a very excellent research project by extremely good researchers. Marie Curie fellowships are a little less competitive, and they do focus on the transfer of knowledge and on the mobility of researchers. The next question, Should you as a researcher contact a host institution before applying? My advice is yes, absolutely. Go get into touch with a host institution that seems to you most suitable for your research project. Get into touch with them as soon as possible. You can do this in a very easy way in case you know someone from a conference or you know this and this person always has the best publications. Approach them with an abstract of your research project and then ask. You can also give some information on the IIF and ask simply, do you think such a project idea might be good? What do you think if we collaborate together? Do so before. You cannot write the project without having information from the host institution. The longer you know each other, the better it is. We have another question. This is nice because it seems you like this webinar. The question is, will there be webinars on the other two types of Marie Curie fellowships? As I explained before, I focused on the International Incoming Fellowship. There are two other types, the intra-European fellowships for researchers being in Europe wanting to go to another European country, and the International Outgoing Fellowship for researchers in Europe who want to spend time outside Europe and want to go back to Europe afterwards. At the moment, we did not foresee such webinars. We will discuss this within the framework of our project, and you will then get information on the information channels where you found the information on this IIF, on our Facebook page, on our blog, etc. We will have a look at this, but you will find basic information either in the country where you are right now or on all the websites that we provided. Next question is, if a young researcher does not yet have a lot of experience, can they participate in an IIF? Can they apply to it? Of course you can. It depends on how you write your proposal. It's the overall score that will eventually count for your proposal. Out of 100, you can get 100-point maximum. We do know that you have to have, depending on the scientific panel you're in, between 90 and 95 points at least to get the funding. Overall, if you fear you do not have yet enough experience, talk to your future supervisor, check it with this person. You can always give it a try. You will get a feedback in any case. If it should not work out this time, you can always resubmit your proposal or write a very similar proposal next year. Give it a try, then at least you know what you're doing. But also have a look at, writing a proposal takes some time. Discuss it with your potential future supervisor and have a look. Maybe you want to still spend the time on working on your publications this year, then give it a try next year. It's hard to answer that question for me now because I do not know your research profile. It is a competitive research scheme. Best is to discuss it with a potential supervisor. Now, the next question is on the host institution, if it is possible to have a list with EU institutions on different research branches. To my knowledge, there's nothing like that exists for Europe. I do know that some countries provide potential applicants with such a list. For the specific case of Switzerland, we do not have that. And also, I think of course, we can provide you with a list. On the other hand, we think you know best who is an expert in your research area and where these people are located. So it's better to have a look really, who is the person with whom I would like to be in touch, than to go the other way around and say, let's say, okay, I would like to go to Berlin and then have a look at what's going on there in Berlin. Choose the supervisor and from then on the host institution. The next question is if there is an age limit. No, luckily there is not. Everything depends on your research, the stage of your research career. As long as you have the PhD or the 4 years full-time equivalent of research experience, you are eligible. It does not matter if you did something else in between, if you pursued another career for a couple of years, or if you were on parental leave. There's no age limit. You can always apply for the Marie Curie fellowships, no matter how old or young you are. I am asked if I can give you pointers to EU research funding for people with a master degree who are seeking for a PhD. That is a nice question and a very good one. My first advice is please check out the EURACCESS website. There are also a couple of job positions for PhD students in EU-financed programs. You will also have a good salary, you will have the status of a Marie Curie Fellow, but you will have the opportunity to work on your PhD. The mobility rule, however, applies again. The next question is if there are particular grants to attend conferences in Europe. They are not from the Marie Curie Fellowships or the People Program. There's nothing like that. I do believe there are COST actions, and I would advise you, COST is spelled C-O-S-T. I am not too familiar with all the details there, but I would advise you to Google this. However, we can also add you some information on this in the follow-up email. The next question is, what about the eligibility of someone who has a master with 3 to 4 years of research experience? That is very clearly, you have to have at least 4 years of research experience, full-time equivalent. If you have less than 4 years, you are not eligible. And please be aware of the fact that you have, or the European Commission in the evaluation process, they have the right to ask you for more information in case they doubt those 4 years of full-time research experience. You have to be able to provide them with a working contract or with some kind of proof that you worked in research, full-time equivalent. If you think, okay, it almost adds up to 4 years, but it's not quite 4 years, there are 3 weeks missing, you are not eligible. The European Commission is counting the days of these 4 years. So if there are 10 days missing, you are not eligible. Make sure you have the 4 years of research experience, otherwise it's unfortunately a waste of time. And the last question is, if PhD students are suitable for this program, in case you have the 4 years of research experience after you obtained the master's degree, yes, and you do not yet have a PhD, you are eligible technically. The IIF, however, is not a scheme primarily to finance PhDs. We stressed, or we try to stress now, that it is really a fellowship for people who have a very specific expertise and who come to Europe to exchange this knowledge with someone in the European research area. So in case you're looking for a PhD, it's better if you check on the EURACCESS website. And now the last question is, where is the best place to insert a recommendation letter? You will have the possibility of these to add the referees assessments. These are essentially recommendation letters. When you enter the registration system, there is one field where you can give the emails of people who will give you this referees assessment, who will give you the recommendation letter. In the proposal, there's no place to do so. Of course, you can do. It's your proposal in the end. I would highly advise you not to put it there. It's a waste of space. And also, it's not information that the evaluator wants to read there. Evaluators will have access to the referees assessments in a particular section, but do not add it to the actual proposal part. This has been it. If there are still some more questions, please contact the national contact points of your countries or of your future host countries. Again, I would like to thank very much Gary for his very helpful insight. I would like to thank you very, very much our project, my colleague Veronique Sordi, who has been moderating the chats and preparing the questions, and our technical support, Francesco. Thank you very much, and I hope we will welcome you in Europe in the next year. Goodbye.
Thank you.